TMBS 159. I'm Matt Leck. With me, Alicia Brooks.
Hello, hello.
And David Griscom.
How's it going?
It's going well. That mic is sounding good, David. And David has a new mic set up, and it's got his bass.
Smooth.
I need an upgrade.
And I upgraded my chair, people might notice, on this 159th episode of TMBS. Abe Lincoln versus SCOTUS, or as I originally would have titled it if YouTube allowed us to go this long, was that Abe Lincoln versus SCOTUS energy and how the left wins versus loses rural America. We got Matt Karp and Luke Mayville both returning to TMBS tonight. Very excited about this, monster of a show we got for you. David and Alicia, how are you doing in this time of the sick king? I don't know, there's this historic press. He's been sick for a very long time, and
right.
Metaphorically, the king in this country has been sick for generations, if not longer. But Donald Trump himself has coronavirus specifically, and he took a spin with some brave souls in the Secret Service. I would volunteer Dan Bongino, former Secret Service guy, to be the one that drives Trump around in the future. He has the skill set, so but it's kind of a laughing matter. At the same time, multiple members of the White House staff who did not necessarily sign up for this are getting sick with it, and of course, the White House doesn't care to take any kind of extended precautions to protect those people. So
and the press corps too,
right?
Yeah. The Donald Trump administration has long been a massive public health threat, but they're quite literally have become one to, the city of Washington, D.C. This weekend was a pretty fun one, right? A lot of ups and downs, a lot of speculation. I'm still of the opinion, though, that Donald Trump actually is invincible, that he never will die. That man has pumped himself through with toxic waste for years and years and years. I don't think anything's going to be able to kill him, unfortunately.
Brian Mayer
Zero hasn't done its work.
Brian Mayer of Brazil Wire had the Brazilian saying about Bolsonaro, which is that ugly vases don't crack, which is what they said about him when he continues to get coronavirus. So at the same time, Trump is an older guy, and he keeps saying the things that you should definitely not say before you're certain you're out of the woods. If you have any sort of concept of karma, even accidental karma that just happens in the world, is I think it's very, very foolhardy what he's doing now. Just from a personal standpoint, but it's also absurdly dangerous and insulting the way he talks about don't let this dominate you. You'll get through it. 200,000 Americans died in the last in this calendar year alone from this thing.
And that doesn't even include the people that died of cancer or didn't get something checked out, just the corona lockdown related deaths. So that's actually an underestimate of the amount of people that he's killed by mismanaging this pandemic.
Yeah, the thing I think we'll have to eventually learn to lock into more is the excess mortality statistics, which is the one that you can't really fudge. More people died. Whether it's from explicit coronavirus, couldn't get a ventilator, I made all the ventilators, what do you want? Or this is a novel virus, we do not know the types of bizarre downstream effects of it. And the disgusting thing is too the way that it's clear that this is all just part of a campaign, right? We sense that we're not getting any kind of bounce of sympathy here, so we're going to go entirely the other way, to the point where I'm going to say, I can't say it's been hard or scary. All I'm saying is I'm learning a lot about the coronavirus, and it's very interesting.
Yeah. And it's a campaign for what at this point? The reality is with, this move from Donald Trump, I don't get who he's really playing to. I understand he's playing to the people who are complete lunatics, anti-maskers, and that group of people. But his whole handling of coronavirus has been quite unpopular, even with people who, support him and vote for him. So I don't know what group of people he's trying to win right now.
I think it would be very unpopular with the group of 250 who are at this Rose Garden event, especially. And those are big donors. Mm-hmm. Do you think those people are going to vote for him if they test positive? Do you think the faith is blind?
I 100% think that these people have their eye on their prize. Pretty
The
amazing.
short-term suffering is worth the long-term goals.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's like the entire story of the Republican Party for the past few years. I mean, I'm one of these people who says that like Trump isn't some grand deviation from what the Republican Party represents. Um, but he definitely is a different kind of politician, a different kind of actor. But they all understand what their end goals are, which are to destroy, American democracy, to wage war on the poor, and to line their pockets. So I think some of these people will actually even take a COVID diagnosis as payment for that.
I mean,
grandparent.
I do think it's worthwhile to, wonder at the dissonance caused by something like, say, the Turning Points USA guy who convinced Charlie Kirk not to go to college and instead become a right-wing propagandist, dying of coronavirus, and subsequently being de-emphasized as a founder, or it no longer emphasized as a founder on the website now, right? Like, how did, like, it is crazy to me, the psychic just violence of being a Republican. Like, how do the younger generations, like, I get the Democratic Party, like, you and David, you saw this in DC, right? Like a lot of bullshit, but like this level of dissonance when, like, everyone's getting sick in the White House staff, nobody trusts each other. I don't know, man. It's
I was going to cue up your commentary, but
Oh
then
yeah,
I interrupted you.
No, I was just going to say that, like, this sets up, a point that I want to make about this. Obviously, what Donald Trump and what the Republicans have done in response to COVID has been completely unacceptable. But the reality is it highlights the vast different realities that most people are living in this country. We talk a lot about the economics of this, the fact that billionaires in this country made $637 billion since COVID started, right? Compared to the mass unemployment and personal financial crisis that so many Americans are facing right now. It's the same thing with healthcare. And to see Donald Trump saying what Matt was just quoting earlier, saying that he's feeling really good, don't be afraid of COVID, don't let it dominate your life. Well, it's easy to say that when you're getting treated by world-class professionals at Walter Reed. He was getting experimental antibodies that you can't even get unless you're in a clinical trial. This guy is somebody who is getting the best medical attention in the country, and he's getting it for free. Compare that to just like the 5.5 million people who got booted off their health insurance just from February to May. All the people who, as Alicia was mentioning earlier, were unable to get diagnosis of serious medical conditions because they didn't want to, be a burden on the hospital system or medical system. I wanted to highlight this story about Donald Trump's personal failure and the failure of HHS, the Health and Human Services. So there was this part of the CARES Act that was supposed to provide payment for uninsured people who needed COVID testing, and then also for certain COVID treatments. It's been a disaster. It's been a very confusing program. Hospitals don't know who to bill. Patients are getting bills for $70,000 for massive amounts of money, and not understanding that they actually have the right to appeal, and feeling that, and preparing themselves for financial ruin. Some people are paying smaller bills, like $4,000 or $5,000 bills, because they don't know any better. Now, there's some facilities across the country, too, that opted out of the program, which makes them ineligible for government payments. So if you're an uninsured person who just happens to go to the wrong facility, then you now get stuck with this massive bill. And this is so wicked because there have been massive advertisements about the fact that if you are feeling unwell, go get tested, get treatment, and you'll be taken care of. And people have been going in with that understanding and then being completely screwed on the other side. What's really nasty about this plan, though, has been the fact that for them to get uninsured people to get payment from HHS, COVID-19 has to be the primary diagnosis. This is coming from a New York Times story that Jackson Health in Miami, for example, only 60% of uninsured COVID-19 patients had decisively met the requirements to have their charges covered. The Kaiser Family Foundation estimates that it would need to, for this program to be operating, to its full extent, it would cost around $13.9 to $41.8 billion alone. And right now we're looking about maybe $1 billion has gone into this program. So the requirements of this program aren't being met, and it's having significant consequences for people. And we're going to start to see those pile up over the next few months. I mean, this discrepancy is absolutely ridiculous. And not only this failure on COVID, but the fact that Donald Trump comes out of this crisis and the first thing that he does is say that there's not going to be any more stimulus payments to American people is absolutely disgusting. It's over. Like we've had to get him out since 2016. Like this chapter absolutely needs to end. It's a danger to the entire future of this country. But we can't allow this to become a culture war kind of thing. And that's what we've been seeing from Biden. Like the fixation right now hasn't been about, let's come up with solutions to get us out of this crisis. It's been, oh, I'm going to I'm doing the basic bare minimum. And it's only compared to Donald Trump that seems like a kind of radical or attractive message, right? It's good that Biden is beating Trump in the polls right now because Trump is such a jackass, right? But we can't like sort of sit on our back feet on this because we're going to have a serious fight against us. I am still of the opinion that we're not going to push, Joe Biden left. But what we need to do is start looking for the next social movement that's going to be able to coalesce the kind of Bernie movement and the political movements that we're going to need to have to, re-inspire a strong political left. And that's going to have to be a demand for dynamic stimulus the moment that Democrats come back into power. And that has to be a serious grassroots demand. And that's the kind of thing that we really need to start organizing now, because what's going to happen over the next few months is going to be chaos, as we're going to start seeing people lose more and more unemployment benefits, as we're going to start seeing people suffering more and more from these medical bills that have been hiding underneath the surface. So things are going to get really bad economically. And if we're not starting to prepare ourselves for this serious fight that we're going to have, either with Biden or with Trump, it's going to be very dark times ahead.
Yeah, I'm glad that we're having Matt Karp and Luke Mayville on the show, because I feel like Matt in his piece in Jackman laid out such a brilliant, both applaud and critique of the Sanders campaign and where we can go from here. And then Luke, with his boots on the ground work in Idaho and the work that needs to be done, especially in red states, has such actionable plans. And it's a relief that they're doing what they're doing, and we're going to have these conversations, because otherwise the pit of despair is just, and just the human suffering that is happening and will grow is a little overwhelming.
Yeah, and I just want to say two things. Obviously, vote for Biden in a swing state, but also like to emphasize the failure of the Democratic Party leadership, particularly at the start of this coronavirus thing, when everyone was saying there was no way they could have been dumb to the fact that once you give the Republicans this blank check for a corporate slush fund, they're not going to come back to the table. And Pelosi was telling, like, Cuomo on CNN, right? Not exactly Jacobin. You don't need to be Matt Karp or Luke Mayville to understand this dynamic. And Pelosi says, wait till you look to see what it does, not what it doesn't do, blah, blah, blah. Fundamentally, and a problem I want to talk to with Matt Karp as we actually bring him on is that leadership here.
Matt, I think that the problem is you didn't buy expensive ice cream and a matching mask with your suit. And if you had done those things, you would have felt better about yourself. And probably would have solved a lot of personal issues. I mean,
I've been eating ice cream, but just not expensive stuff.
This is like you need to spend like $12 to $16 on ice cream if you really want.
Jenny's.
Lean in.
Jenny's.
I don't know.
It's in LA. Is Jenny's in New York?
Jenny? Isn't it from
Jenny
Ohio?
Everywhere? Oh, I don't know. There's just literal Jenny's in LA.
I think that's the Pelosi brand. That's the brand.
That's the one she had.
Yeah.
That was her fridge full of Jenny. Jenny with an I.
Jesus.
Just so you know, it's the real thing, and it was definitely $12 a pop, and my wife loves it. So
I'm glad that you decided your wife loved it, because I was like, it is good. Let's not knock Jenny's. It was just an inappropriate thing that Nancy did.
Yes, no, Nancy shouldn't get to have Jenny.
I think Jenny's is just a small business that's blown up.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, let me introduce. You go by Matt or Matthew?
Matt's fine. Yeah.
I'm a Matt too, so
my comrade name, my cadre name,
Your name is Matthew, and your comrade name is Matt.
Have you noticed on in sort of conflict with neoliberal Twitter that they say, "Oh, of course it's a." I don't think you're responsible for it. I think maybe it's Matt Brunig, but it's, "Oh, of course it's a Matt," is
It's
saying
a
that.
Matt. Yeah, it's got to be a Matt or a Dave. Yeah, it's one of the
Yeah.
two. Yeah, those are the Bernie bro names. They just like the Obama, the Chapo guys always joke about John 26 or John 74, John without an
Right.
H. That's
Mhm.
the ultimate Obama guy. We're Matts and Daves over here. I guess, but Dave, do you ever do Dave or you David?
You know, like Dave is a character that you meet at like 2 a.m. at the bar, so he
Yeah.
exists. But here I do David.
Okay. One day we'll all meet Dave.
Yeah.
So yeah, joining the show, returning to the show, is Associate Professor of History at Princeton University, author of This Vast Southern Empire, which I have on Audible, and I don't have my phone right in front of me. I was going to show it off. It says finished on the Audible, one of my favorite
Awesome.
audiobooks. And contributing editor for Jacobin, his most recent piece, How Abraham Lincoln Fought the Supreme Court. We'll touch on that in a bit. But we also wanted to touch on your I guess postmortem of Bernie 2020 in Jacobin. I think one of the finest, most
Fear.
substantial.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we've moved. It's been some time now. So, but before we get into that, I want to play this Joe Biden clip from a MSNBC town hall where he's now, I think, be more forthright than he was during the campaign that he is the moderate beating the socialist. And there's kind of an a la carte of statements here. A historian might want to take issue with, take issue with whichever ones you want. But I kind of want to focus on the fight against the moderate establishment and how conscious they are of it too. Here is that.
Left. I look like a socialist. Look, I'm the guy that ran against the socialists. Remember, I got in trouble in the whole campaign. 20-some candidates. Joe Biden was too centrist, too moderate, too straightforward. That was Joe Biden. I have taken on the very people that, in fact, we're worried about. I've taken on the Castros of the world. I've taken on the Putins of the world. I've taken on all these dictators. I haven't cozied up to them. I'm the guy that's been straightforward with them. I'm the guy that's let them know it stops here. It stops with me. It stops with me as president. I am no more a socialist than or a communist than Donald Trump is. Well, I won't say it. Anyway.
So, yeah, there's some honesty in that, despite the red
kind
baiting.
of a beat.
Yeah. So what's your response to that, Matt?
Joe's rock and rolling. I'm getting like a lot of Straight Talk Express vibes there, like a lot of John McCain energy coming strong to the mic there with Joe. This is obviously the Lincoln Project, et cetera, et cetera. The whole Never Trump phenomenon has really been kind of sculpting Biden, and he's happy to be sculpted in that kind of image where, I'm gonna regime change. What is it? Rogue state rollback, or something like that. You better watch out, Nick Maduro. I mean, to be honest, in a funny way, I got to say, maybe this just shows how long it's been since the primary and where we're in a different place. I'm just going to be dead honest and maybe disappoint you or some listeners. This doesn't even hurt me anymore. It doesn't even piss me off. It just feels total boilerplate. It just feels like he's saying this, and he did this in the debate too, right? When Trump came at him, and he kind of just, I'm not a socialist, I beat a socialist. The Democratic Party's me. 6 months ago, this boiled my blood. And I got to tell you right now, I guess it's absorbing the kind of reality of defeat and thinking about this as a much longer project and not being it's a certain kind of strength, I guess, to say, okay, I'm not going to, you can't, cut me with every one of your little insults, because he's right. He won. This is where the party is now. That's where it is. We understand what he stands for. It's plain as day. He's doing this, he's running on this strategy to, win the middle. It's working, we have to acknowledge that it's working. And he's, in a really strong position. So our question, the challenge for us is, how do we fight this? How do we go against this? And what is the playing field for us with this ideology in charge, which is, it's a different problem than we've had in the last 4 years. And I think we start with that. But it's funny. It's like I have no qualms about, about wanting Biden to win this election. I just really don't. I just think it puts us in a stronger position for the fight going forward. And so in a certain way, when he does that, he plays that game. It's like, okay, this is who you are. This is your strategy. Go for it. Do it. Do you. You do you, Straight Talk Express. And we'll take it from here. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, because the argument that I think is maybe a bit too online is whenever you say, it's better for the Democrats to be empowered than the Republicans, people automatically assume you're covering for the Democrats instead of just saying, like, it's not advantageous for us. Like, it hasn't hurt the Democratic establishment at all that they've been out of power, right? Like, especially, like, I mean, that's like the whole thing about we spent a lot of time on this show going after the Warren, the Patagonia type liberals, right? And because like that was an
allergy,
and like, that was an elaborated alternative. And I guess the Never Trumpers was an elaborated alternative too, but we didn't want to really, I guess there was some denial. Can you speak to the denial maybe that we had that is the real fight, because that's ultimately who decided the primary?
Yeah, I mean, the piece goes into the nitty gritty, it almost feels like so long ago that it's not worth mentioning. But these were the voters who came out, these former Republicans who came out, older voters, and who are still, according to the polls, these older, blue collar, but even more strongly white collar workers, retirees, who came out, independents and Republicans who came out strongly for Biden in the primary, swarmed whatever turnout increases Bernie managed to bring to the polls, and carry the day on Super Tuesday. This is the coalition that Biden has now. I mean, what do we do about that? I think it's a complicated playing field, and it's like, I don't know if it's too soon. I don't know if this is where you guys want to go with this, about what are the Bernie-crat, just even within this sort of narrow girdle of American domestic politics, what does a Bernie-crat do under a Biden administration? I don't think we've sort of figured out. I mean, I don't think the Bernie-crats as a whole have any unified strategy on this yet, or have a unified idea. And it's going to be, there are some who kind of lean towards, oh, look, the Biden Bernie task forces, there's something there. We can't get most of what we want, but we can get a few things. I'm leaving out the totally Kool-Aid drinkers who are like the most progressive president in history. Like, obviously those people aren't even in the conversation, but there are some people I respect who seem to think that, a few things are possible given the structure of the situation, that, minimum wage, spending, that there are things that will make a difference, and that in effect, Bernie-crats should be beating the drum and leading the way for this rather than retreating into total opposition. I'm more skeptical, because I think the coalition that brought Biden to power is going to breathe a massive sigh of relief after he wins, and the energy for any kind of real transformation is going to dissipate. There's still going to be a recession, so who knows? We're still going to have fights about how big the stimulus is. We're going to have Obama part 2, and it's like a little bit dispiriting to think about the debt ceiling and the McConnell and the filibuster and all that austerity. But I think the reason why I still sort of feel like these battles are better for us than any battles under Trump is, at least then we can be, if whatever we take programmatically, tactically in regard to the Biden administration, whether we're just throwing thunderbolts, as I expect, you guys will be doing, and I'll probably be doing, or whether even if you're, if you're doing some kind of inside game too, the playing field is really going to be about these material politics. It's really going to be about austerity. It's going to be about the unemployed. It's going to be about the fact that this economy, that COVID has wrought a class war on America, and we have to reckon with that somehow. And we will be front and center in kind of clarifying the stakes of those politics. At least there's an opportunity for that to happen. And whereas increasingly this is not looking as likely, but a Trump victory, puts us on the back foot, and I think puts those Halliburton Democrats, those never Trumpers, in front and center again, because all we're doing is heroically opposing, the brown fascist orange man, and there's no movement materially at all. So that's like, I guess you didn't even ask me for an election take, but this is apparently just everything I'm saying now. So.
No, that's kind of what I wanted, because that's just been the preoccupation that I've been seeing is, like, and again, this is maybe just callers calling in wanting to say like, well, why do I have to vote for Democrats? Like, you don't have to, but like as long as we're like talking about who we would prefer in power, like it's especially the last 4 years have informed that it hasn't been good. It wasn't good for but not to mention disregard the never Trumpers. The Obama wing of the party was strengthened, like went from strength to strength through this time period too. So it's just strategically not a good playing field for us. Should we move on to the Abe Lincoln radical Republican Supreme Court, or did you want to ask anything, David Leisha?
I just wanted to say quickly, Matt, that I can relate to feeling kind of like lulled into like, okay, we're going to be playing Biden's game. But then when I was rereading your piece last night, just going through it beat by beat of what happened, like my heart rate just started to go up. I was like so full of this rage I hadn't felt in a while. So it was funny hearing you say that you're feeling like kind of more pacified now, because I had been, and then your piece triggered that.
Yeah. It's a weird time though, because I really appreciated just, briefly in the piece, what you were saying about what's happening in Texas, for example. And it was really these kind of like suburban voters who typically go Republican who were able to bring, because I was someone who's actually pretty hot on Bernie Sanders being able to pull an upset against Biden, and it looked likely, obviously, without the interference. But it's a very frustrating and difficult time, I think, for us strategically right now, because 2 years ago we were talking about the death of neoliberalism, and now we're actually seeing its like kind of resurgence, not just in the United States, but in the United Kingdom as well, and all of these like left populist movements. My biggest worry going forward is what we're going to be able to do without having this kind of national political figure, and not sort of everything sort of fragmenting. Because that being said, as like bad as the political moment is right now, you look at somewhere like Austin, Texas, they have like a radical member of the city council. They were able to defund the police. There are just so many different avenues of where we're having to fight that I'm feeling more and more that we're going to really have to like rebuild these organizations from the bottom up, instead of thinking that we're going to be able to have another kind of Bernie Sanders Hail Mary shot at it.
Yeah, I think the fights. Two things. Yeah, just on Lich, I agree completely. That piece, like if I went back and read that right now, I would get mad too, because it was written out of this product of like deep kind of almost therapy to kind of get through that. I had to like put
like
all
pressing
those numbers
on a bruise.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was like, I think I started writing that thing in like April, and I didn't finish it until like, I don't know, June or something. It was just like, every day I was like, maybe I'll look at one more precinct in the kind of energy corridor of Houston, and that will like kind of somehow give the key to all mythologies that will open up and like explain this horrific defeat. Yeah, it sucked. But David, I agree. I think there isn't. I'm in a certain sense, like I'm kind of, I don't want to say I'm checking out of national politics, because I'm not. I'm like looking at it every minute. But I think for our project, for the broader Bernie project, for the left Bernie project, I think the avenues nationally are limited, and I think there is a lot more to be done municipally, at the locally at the state level. We're seeing some of that. My hope is that we don't get cordoned off into kind of, a sort of, deep blue set of cul-de-sacs, where we're just kind of doing all of like the most rad. First of all, if you're in a deep blue cul-de-sac, then do the most rad stuff you can do. Okay, fine. I understand that. But if that becomes the kind of replacement for the Sanders project, which had a much broader kind of majoritarian bent to it, which envisioned a kind of, hey, it's not actually impossible. It might not be here right now, but it's not impossible to build a majority for democratic socialism, And that, I think we can't like lose sight of that somehow. It's hard to know how to do that. But my instinct is when we think about which one of these, how we think about these local fights or these municipal fights, is that we shouldn't lose sight of, the goal shouldn't just be to kind of have the most like badass Maoist on, the city council, right? From my perspective, the goal is to think about taking power nationally, ultimately, even if that's going to be a ways down the road. So we still want to hit the hardest, the most majoritarian themes of the platform. I do feel like that's what Bernie taught us. So that's kind of where I am, but how to actually finesse that, because whatever. I mean, I like Sawant. It's not like I'm saying Sawant should stand down for some kind of progressive, I mean, it's hard to figure out how that plays out, but I just would hate to see the Bernie-crat left in its kind of depth and its breadth retreat into, a kind of a, corpuscule of kind of, DSA activist types in the familiar places.
This was something I think Michael was really concerned about, and it's a really valid point to make, because I think there's a lot of personality types that become incredibly dogmatic, and I just think it's valid to flag.
How do you forecast the durability of the Obamacrat sort of project? Like, I don't know really how to judge it.
That's a good question, because that's the dominant wing even more. I mean, I think the Never Trumpers came in and kind of, coasted Biden to the nomination, and they're going to be decisive in his victory. And they still probably wield more influence than we do, certainly. But it's the Obama types that are still in charge of this party. And what are the Near Tandons, going to do? There are some, basically the left, what you could call, this is probably a stretch, but like left Obamacrats, the kind of Heather Boucher or whatever, kind of these sort of Warren-leaning economist types who are like, who will say some nice things about how you can't separate the economy and politics, that sort of fundamental things that we agree with, that, the economy is about power, inequality is a drain on the economy, and they're not austeritarians. They're kind of, whatever, maybe they're progressive neoliberals, if you will. But that's a wing of the party that I think is ascendant. And I don't really know where they're going to go and how they're going to deal with the kind of, the Larry Summers wing, I guess Tim Geithner wing, the kind of center neoliberals. There's going to be a lot of negotiations, and I don't expect a lot out of that. The question for the Obamacrats is, they actually can win. We got a little too invested in this Democratic Party can never win because they lost once in 2016. In fact, they won in 2008. They won in 2012. They won in 2018. They're probably going to win again this year. They can win. Can they govern? Can they change anything? Can they make this country more equal? So far, resounding no. And how are they going to reconcile with that? I mean, probably what they're going to do is just blame the Republicans. That's what they always do. But I think it will be different this time, having the experience of the Bernie left, even though we don't have a huge punching power in Congress, we have a couple voices, but we have media, we have a little more media weight, we have a little more we have, tens of millions of voters who kind of were Bernie voters, and everyone knows that. And I think they're not going to be able to just totally ignore the left as they were in 2010, 2009, 2010. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to write their policy. We're not. But it's going to be a different dynamic. And so, I'm not exactly sure how that's going to play out.
Yeah, I totally, that's a lot of what I wanted to know. And I think it is sort of nebulous because there's a lot of posing that there's no conflict here, actually. Like the Tom Perez, Keith Ellison fight was about nothing really at all, actually. So, and are they just going to keep doing that while maintaining a sort of posture? Probably.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's how they like to do it now. Certainly before the election, it'll be interesting to see. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I think a lot of it does depend on, I actually do think Bernie has a role to play here. And I sort of hope he's been in very kind of, let's win the election, shut up about everything else mode, which, we can agree or disagree with, but that's who he's always been. Once Biden gets elected, I think he actually will. He's, Bernie's deathless, right? So he will be there. And will he take this, there's a good article in Jacobin in the last issue, the kind of two paths for the, Bernie-crat left going forward, the, road of, kind of basically coalition or confrontation. And Bernie and Biden have this kind of like bro relationship or something, like Biden, for whatever reason, was I think personally less contemptuous of Bernie than most of the Democratic Party. And I think Bernie's instinct has been kind of a little bit more coalition, but I think the politics will force him, I hope, to take a more confrontational stand. And I think that will count. And I think he still can be in a kind of, if you want to say a politics of opposition against the kind of reigning, kind of Biden admin. I hope he isn't just subsumed into just tweeting about Mitch McConnell all day. I hope he's actually able to sort of say, okay, now is the time to re-articulate our politics and to really clarify the difference between our Democratic Socialist project and what these guys want to do, which is, throw a few bits of gum in the dam and, just let the same, as the waves continue to roll in. So I'm a little hopeful, at least. I guess, of course, at the end of the day, you still got to believe in Bernie. I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think in the remaining minutes here, let's go to your piece. I want to share it on the screen here just so people check it out. This is how Abraham Lincoln fought the Supreme Court. This was in Matt's most recent piece in Jacobin. A more radical approach to the Supreme Court than FDR's court packing, Matt. I didn't know that was possible, but apparently the radical Republicans, who a lot of people don't know, were, focused on not allowing slavery to expand, were upset with the Supreme Court even more. So tell us about them a little bit.
Yeah, I heard, Matt, I heard you and David talking about this at one point a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, court packing is great. And I'm interested to see if you guys have thought more about it, or unless you have thoughts. But I'm not opposed to it in any respect. It's a tactic, it's a tool in the shed. But the essential thing, as you guys were saying, is recognizing the political power of the Supreme Court and questioning its legitimacy as an unelected kind of super legislature. And, why should these political appointees, lifetime aristocrats, be sitting in conclave and making political decisions for us? And that's actually far more than any of the procedural stuff. I mean, I think in some ways the kind of instinct to go to court packing shows the kind of lingering proceduralism that even a lot of people on the liberal left or the left still operate. It's like, okay, well, we have this plan, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. It's like after Dred Scott, which was the kind of pro-slavery decision that said you can't stop the extension of slavery anywhere, it's not constitutional. Republicans didn't say, okay, they had procedural plans to kind of fix the court and say, here's how we're going to get around it. But effectively, they just said, the judicial branch cannot reign supreme on a political question. And as soon as we get power, we're going to carry out our platform. And eventually we'll make sure we'll get the court in line. And that's what happened. I mean, of course, the Civil War accelerated everything. But when they took power, they, abolished slavery in the territories. And that was in direct violation of the unconstitutional ruling in Dred Scott. And they effectively kind of rejected the whole premise of judicial review, which is the kind of really anodyne name that we give to allowing judges to sit as an unelected legislature. And even more than that, almost more interesting in terms of what they did when they were in power, because that's not really in our ken right now. Their attack on the court wasn't, okay, here's our plan to fix it, here's what we're going to do. They attacked the kind of mythology and the mystique around the court as a whole, not just the decision, but the court. And I think this plays into all sorts of larger, politics for us that work. The majoritarian angle that we were talking about earlier, the kind of, I still do sort of believe in a certain kind of left populism, even though we've, had a few setbacks, had a few bumps. The kind of belief in democracy, that resonates with a lot of what Bernie's campaign was about. That I think some, more cynical elements of the left sort of eye roll at that stuff. But I think, the letting the people rule is an important component of any socialist project. And the Supreme Court kind of sits athwart so much of that and kind of, either potentially or in actuality blocks it. And so, yeah, I mean, I think Sam Moyne, and there's another guy, Ryan Dorfler, I think is his name, who've written really well on this and from a kind of a deeper legal history perspective. If you guys are into that, I think you should try to get one of those guys. Or maybe, Ryan, I know, is really sharp on this stuff. He'd be good to talk to, because they have a lot of ideas about how to uncoil the power of the court that aren't just, okay, we're going to add a few more justices and play this game of chicken which is a means. It's not an end. The end is to reestablish Congress as the place where laws are made and politics are decided ultimately.
Yeah, I like the sort of political mood of it all. Like, there's a couple points here. This is from a Cincinnati newspaper saying the court is the citadel of slavery, and Republicans intend to storm it. And then later, Republicans also denounced quote superstitious worship of the Supreme Court, mocking fulsome flattery of life tenured judges. Who like that's where we need to get to, obviously, psychically. And the way Lincoln in the Lincoln Douglas debates, if you could just explain to people the way he basically responded to Douglas, who was like, well, they make the best judgments this side of heaven. And I think Lincoln's response was great.
Yeah, I mean, Lincoln says, look, they don't have the authority. He says it again in the first inaugural. They don't have the authority. They can decide the law. They can decide a case, but they don't have the authority to decide a political question for us. This has to, otherwise we cease to become our own, rulers. And yeah, obviously the contemporary liberalism is very far from this right now. I mean, we have, we're making icons and rock stars and celebrities and, divinities even now of our Supreme Court justices. And I don't think I would expect that to continue in certain precincts that, now RBG's gone, we have to have Sotomayor is going to get more press, or something. And obviously that's the exact wrong angle, not just because it's, cringy as fuck, but because it's actually like setting up, no, we need a better, we need a better aristocrat. We need a better set of aristocrats to do these laws for us. It's funny. It's like, I guess I've become in reading about the Republicans and the struggle against slavery, and I guess it sort of fits our era too. I've become kind of a congressional supremacist about this, in terms of pushing back against the imperial presidency and the kind of, the military, industrial state under executive direction. And I guess it's convenient that it's the one branch that the Democrats control. But I mean, that was the one branch that the anti-slavery Republicans controlled before the war. It's not a coincidence. It's the branch that's closest to the people. And they pointed that out all the time. The House, that is, not the Senate, of course. And I really think I think that it will be an increasing, obviously we all have dreams about rewriting the Constitution, but in the short run, in the medium run even, I think pushing Congress, not just as like part of, how a bill becomes a law, but is actually the kind of central forum for doing the people's business, I think should be, even a bigger part of where we've been than it is now. So yeah, winning seats in Congress is important, winning lefty seats, but also kind of, bumping up the House of Representatives as a kind of, we can't make it a parliament. We wish it were, but, and whatever, for those of you who aren't parliamentary socialists, that's fine. Go ahead, do your thing, overthrow the fucker. But in the meantime, I think, I think we need to trumpet the House as opposed to all of the other branches, frankly, as the place where the buck should stop. And the 19th century Republicans did this all the time in a way that I think we're still, even liberals don't really do right now, even after they took the House.
I think it's so right. Like what you're saying too is like making the argument too that like, the buck should stop with the House. We should have the most democratic body in our system being the most powerful. And it's interesting though to think about this strategically, like what we need to do. Like I think I agree with you that like we need to basically weaken the court politically. I like court packing only in the sense of like if it delegitimizes the court in people's minds, then that's probably a good thing. But I don't think that that's necessarily going to be a solution. But I've been thinking a lot just in this conversation about like a line that I always quote from, Ronan Burtonshaw, our friend over at Tribune, who says like, the job of the left today is to convince people that politics can change their lives. And, and a big part of that has to be us starting to talk to people who feel very, dissatisfied with the way the system works and to start to articulate visions of like what we would do in power rather than just saying we have all these policies. Like we want to reimagine the way that the government works while making arguments that are fundamentally that don't seem foreign, for example. Like that's why I like looking at the legacy of the radical Republicans or the populists. Like you're reading those writings and, today we consider those movements to be quintessentially, American movements. But they were radically trying to reimagine the way that the American system worked. And I think that's the only way that we're going to be able to put in democratic socialist politics going forward.
Yeah, David, I love it. Oh, Lisha, go ahead. Sorry.
It's Leisha, annoying.
Leisha, oh, I'm so sorry.
Confusing.
I've only heard it half a dozen times, and I still.
Yeah, well, I sometimes mumble, But it's interesting what David was saying, because you also end your Bernie piece with kind of like, the embryos, or like the future voters are still being created. And I think that but the young people who are on social media, like when I was in middle school, I had no idea about the Supreme Court. I had no idea about the stock market. I had no idea about like how the tax system worked. And part of that was socioeconomic, like it just didn't really apply. And I do think there is a big wave of just people like at a much younger age really understanding how these institutions work, and that is going to mobilize a very, I think that will inspire people to feel like politics impact them, and there will be direct action because of that.
I mean, I guess you could look at that as a kind of upshot of all the resistance and sanity that, at least like in some of that intensity about the kind of the ensnarlements of this sort of wretched system have trickled down in some way. And I think David, you're right. I completely agree that the first path out of that, on the left, we're big on abolishing, we're big on, on just waving our hands and kind of, sort of evaporating all of the monsters that we don't like. It's satisfying. It's rarely effective. I think the medium term struggle, I think that's the horizon. We don't abandon the horizon. We don't, tie ourselves to the mast of the Constitution or something. But in the medium term, I think we recognize that to build our politics, we still need to come up with ideas and not just in the policy arena, but political ideas, systemic ideas that kind of resonate with people. So where they live and where they are. And that includes finding these kind of examples in the American grain. And for me, part of that does mean finding some of the legacies, even in the Constitution itself, that are actually, we, not to get sort of too technical, but we kind of, so much of the sort of discourse on what the Constitution is sort of, takes, a very conservative Madisonian checks and balances approach to it as gospel. That's what the Constitution was intended to do, and that's the only thing that it can be. There are some words in the preamble that are very powerful about the government's power to assure general welfare for the entire country, that shape and frame, and in other kinds of traditions of constitutionalism, popular constitutionalism, living constitutionalism, that kind of offer, I think, ways for the left to claim elements of that Constitution without handcuffing ourselves. I think that can be part of the project to sort of trumpet some parts of these institutions, the democratic parts of these institutions and these legacies, and say, look, the Federalist Society doesn't get to have all of this stuff. The RBG, fanboys don't get to have all this stuff. Actually, the Democratic left can say, if you peel it back, some of the trappings, some of the things in this history and in this system, are at least terrain that we can fight on. And I think that's more, to me, that just in my gut, I feel that is a more effective politics than the kind of grad seminar style, hand wave that just annihilates, that just runs like a knife through all the things that are problematic in the world, and doesn't sort of resonate with someone who's not already there. I don't know. So maybe I'm just sheepdogging here, but that's my so. Yeah.
Follow me on this thought for a second, but I think that has a direct parallel with Michael's point he made towards the end of his life about like, why should the right have a monopoly on religion? Like, I think there are just certain tools we have at our expense, and we underutilize them. I think it's because the right just understands how to like use and wield power better. And so why would we not try and interpret the Constitution in a way that would help us and feel relatable to people?
Yeah, absolutely. This whole take feels is for me influenced by Michael. Like, even if he, more than anything specifically he said, but I think that impulse about, that you and David have articulated about finding people where they are and kind of trying to find arguments and approaches that don't just sort of like sound good in a closed space, but that move us towards the world that we want to build. And that can resonate with people outside this room. So yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say there aren't risks in kind of moving in this direction, that there aren't plenty of kind of like liberal constitutionalists that are going to be that are going to want to co-opt and kind of neuter the our politics at every turn, and that we should be aware of that stuff. But I think to say throw all these institutions, or throw the fight over these institutions outside, overboard, I don't find that as persuasive. So I say, fight for Congress, fight for elements within our political system is at least open to our struggle.
And it's just to make a quick point, it's very in vogue now for the kind of neoliberal, MSNBC type Democrat to have all these woke criticisms of the New Deal, right? Which was a very successful, government, program. And now sort of defend the Supreme Court, which is an institution that has always stood for, throughout its whole history has stood on the wrong side of history. The only argument that people make is the line you learn in high school or whatever, protects people against the, the minority from the tyranny of the majority, right? But then it's look at the history of the Supreme Court and see when it's ever done that. And I don't know, if the right wing and the neoliberal forces were so successful at being able to poison one of the most popular programs in American history, that being the New Deal, I don't know why we can't be a little bit more subversive regarding the Supreme Court.
It depends on how you interpret the minority.
Well, yeah, that's
yeah. I mean, they had the court had really, if you look at it, it's only about 10 good years where they were helpful in civil rights. You got to give the Warren Court, you got to give Thurgood a little bit of credit, but 10 years out of how long have we been kicking along in this rotten husk? Sorry, I'm falling back into left speak. In 10 years out of in this glorious American history, 10 years out of 200, 250 almost, that the court has been good. Not enough.
But I think there's optimism to think we might turn the corner on this stuff. Ian Millhiser's not a leftist. He's a liberal think progress writer. And he wrote a book about the Supreme Court before any of this happened. I mean, there's a whole generation of people who saw 2000 who are seeing what's going on. And I think time is ripe to basically return to, that sort of radical Republican spirit about it. Matt Karp, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, Leisha. Thank you, David. Thank you, Matt.
It was so nice to meet you virtually.
Yes, good talk.
All right, that was excellent.
No, that was perfect.
And check out Matt's book, This Vast Southern Empire. I played it while playing Civ 5 years ago, or I listened to it while playing Civ 5 years ago, making a sort of a progressive empire in the Gulf of Mexico that countered the one that was aspired to by those slavocrats. So
yeah, it was fun for me to talk to him because I remember going to, when that book came out, he gave a little talk in DC. I can't remember the bookstore, but just sort of being in the audience and being very excited to hear a kind of radical lefty go through Civil War, especially Southern history, as much as horrible as it was. It was very interesting for me.
Were you incognito?
I usually hung out towards the side. I didn't really ask questions back then either. Should we do a quick gem before we get Luke on, or do you think he's ready?
Let me text Luke.
Let's do the gem because I'm going to send him the link now in case he doesn't have it yet.
I beat you to it.
Okay, cool.
All right. Well, Jesus, let me just switch modes here for a second to go from having fun conversations to talking about, to talking about something. I'm just so hot and mad about this, and I've been hot and mad about it for a long time, which has been the complete failure of the system to provide for people in the middle of a pandemic. Just something that you think that we'd be able to achieve a bare minimum about. Seeing Donald Trump do what he did today, basically squashing any hope that we had for another round of stimulus checks, was devastating. But it was getting me, to think about, what really happened to this $1,200 check that people got in the first place. For the most part, people either use that to pay their immediate expenses. This is something that we got information that we got from the Federal Reserve. For the most part, people used it to pay their immediate expenses, food, rent, things like that. But 25% of Americans use their money, their $1,200 stimulus check, to pay off debt. And it is just a reminder. I did the exact same thing, Matt. That was the first. Yeah, exactly. It's just another reminder of the system that we're living in that just preys on working class people across this country. Organizations like Encore Capital, which own significant amounts of debts. That's what they do. So basically, for people who haven't gone through this process before of being severely in debt to an organization, there are all of these kind of predatory firms out there that will buy your debt from, the organization that you owe it to for, cents on the dollar. And then they become really aggressive to be able, to recover the money. So Encore Capital, this is from ProPublica, a great report that came out today. Encore Capital, the largest debt buyer in the country, announced that it had doubled its previous record for earnings in a quarter. And it primarily had the CARES Act to thank, because all of these people in the United States who have been suffering under debt found an option, an opportunity to basically pay some money that just sort of came in as a windfall to get people to stop abusing them over the phone and also from garnishing their wages. Encore Capital has around 2 million to 3 million accounts in the United States. Picks up around 2 million to 3 million accounts in the United States per year, according to their public filings. And last year, on average, the company was paying around 8.6 cents on the dollar for each account. So for them to buy a debt of $3,142, Encore paid $271. And again, this is from a report that came out of ProPublica today. So while the point of this act, of the stimulus money, was to stimulate the economy by getting people to go out to buy food, to buy consumer goods and services to stimulate the economy. But what did it do? It just went to these nasty predatory firms, which are, as we speak right now, are preparing for another wave of debt payments. They have been on the move, picking up all of the significant debt. And as we talked about at the beginning of the show, as we start to see more and more medical debt, we're definitely going to see another cycle where debt collectors, along with billionaires and all the other villains of this system, have been doing very well under this crisis. Sorry, Matt, you're muted.
I saw a story. Sorry about that. Landlords realizing that they need more stimulus because they need their people to be able to pay rent, basically. I don't know. It's very discouraging. I mean, and I don't know if it's even worthwhile to say like how much is intentional, but at some point you have to look at things in terms of how they're acting and not like what they're saying. And like, it just seems like the ruling class is like they know what's happening, right? Like, and like, there's a reason, because if the stimulus check, or if I'm wrong, but if those stimulus checks were, more frequent, the impact it had was noticeable in a positive direction, right? Even the one-time stimulus, like I think we've talked about it in the show, like pretty amazing for what it did that one time, even though it was being soaked up by all these parasites. And they this is what everyone was saying, like Cuomo on CNN saying to Pelosi, like, hey, tie this to something that makes it stick until the problem is gone. And she specifically didn't want to do it because of the national debt. That's the Democratic leadership we have right now.
I know, and it's absolutely despicable. And let us not also forget that these organizations have been using the courts to their advantage. And specifically right now with coronavirus, a lot of people are afraid to show up at court. They're not aware that, their court dates are still happening with COVID. And they've been very successful at being able to recoup a lot of their losses. Now, I believe Encore said that they've stopped, coming after people, through the court system during COVID, but they're not the only debt buyer in town. Right. There's a significant amount of other organizations that are continuing to do this as we're going forward. I mean, people are really, really suffering right now. And it's just so frustrating to see the American system, the American government completely on its back heels and trying to defend, everyday people who, these debts, by the way, I mean, like they'd be significant to me. They're significant to any kind of working person. We're talking like $2,000, $3,000, which is a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. But in the grand scheme of things, when we're talking about the amount of money that we've been giving basically for free to the top, 1% in the United States, through the era of cheap money. I mean, these are things that we could actually be dealing with. And we're not.
We gotta get to Luke soon, but have you seen the documentary, the Queen of Versailles, about the
yes, about the man that was making the mansion in Florida, and then
he was a timeshare.
Yes,
David, you got to see this if you haven't. Like,
I've
he's
seen it 3 times.
It's amazing. It's this
It's really
timeshare,
good.
and he was building this timeshare empire off of easy money, and lo and behold, what happens when the financial crisis happens? But Donald
He's
Trump,
so angry when he runs out of easy money.
he talks
Like,
about
livid.
seeing Trump a couple times, which is very interesting. The documentary came out in 2012. So like, there's a reason Trump. There's a certain class that is very familiar with Donald Trump and has been for a while that makes it like not that surprising that so many people predicted he would later become president.
Mm-hmm.
But let's bring on Luke Mayville now. I think if you guys are ready.
Yeah, sounds good.
Absolutely. Yeah, that documentary is great. And there's also an Imelda Marcos documentary I just watched recently that's really good. I'll look up the title.
All right.
Luke Mayville.
Hey, everyone.
Hey.
There he is. Let me just read his intro for people. I'm sure, most of the TMBS crew is familiar, but for anybody who's new here, co-founder of Reclaim Idaho, author of Adams and the Fear of John Adams and the Fear of American Oligarchy, teaching at Boise State University. Is that BSU?
Yes.
Luke? Honors College, and author of this piece in Commonweal, which we're going to discuss this evening. How Progressives Win Rural America, Do Something Big. Luke, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, super producer. Good to see you, David. Good to see you, Alicia.
Good to see you, Luke.
You forgot part of Luke's resume that's very important.
Uh-huh.
Good dear friend of Michael Brooks, undergrad buddies, studied abroad in Turkey together.
That's true, and actually, I have a photo of Michael in Idaho, which I found very touching. Posted here. Michael Brooks in Idaho in October 2018, knocking a door and getting ready to persuade a Republican to vote for Medicaid expansion. And 3 weeks later, we won with 61% of the vote. And that's actually sort of related to what we're talking about tonight, isn't it, Luke?
It is. Yeah. Michael came out. He was attending a conference at Boise State University where, by the way, he met Ben Burgess for the first time. But then it was also, I think part of the reason why he was really interested in attending that conference is because he also wanted to make it out to Idaho. And because we had been working on this grassroots campaign for the previous year or more. And I was always telling him about it. I would visit New York and we would hang out and talk a lot about it. And he really wanted to see it in person, and he really got to. He went and knocked doors. He engaged Republican voters who were insistent on building that wall, but also wanted to expand Medicaid. So it was an incredible experience getting to go door to door with him. Also with our friend Andrew Shumich, who has been a big fan of TMBS and is probably watching right now. He went out and knocked on doors with us as well.
So Luke, I have a quick question before we dive into it. A lot of people online have been wondering if Michael was wearing Yeezys. I don't think he owned Yeezys. Do you remember if the footwear when you guys were going door to door were Yeezys?
I actually don't know. I didn't catch up on that with him.
Owned Yeezys.
I think I saw a remark on that for the first time, but earlier today. But yeah, he was never. He always said, Kanye, great producer, mediocre rapper.
Yeah, but I have to say, Michael 100% owned Yeezys.
Oh, those were Yeezys?
He 100% did, and he loved them.
Take the L.
And he wore them. I remember, I think we were still doing Two Dope Boys when he had a pair. And it was during a Kanye thing. He's like, I'm going to keep it on the low. But he wore his Yeezys.
I should have texted you, Matt. I was like, I just don't, because I knew he didn't like Kanye. And he was always like very, remind me in the post game, I'm going to say a product line in a group he also didn't support because he didn't like
I think a reason he often elaborated criticism of Kanye is probably because of guilt of wearing the Yeezys, maybe.
Okay,
so.
got it. All right, so how do we win in red states?
Oh, well, I mean, the piece is all about this theme of bottom-up organizing because Medicaid expansion, it's been incredible over the past couple of years. Medicaid expansion has been winning at the ballot all over the place. and most recently it won in Missouri. Mm-hmm. I saw a pattern in this Missouri vote that I'd been seeing for a while that really troubled me, where, even though it was winning, and that's a great thing because Missourians are now going to get coverage, and we should not diminish that victory because the voters, after all, they voted for it. But the problem is that they're just not winning rural counties. They're not, and I had seen that in Nebraska, in Utah, in Montana, where they actually lost the vote for complicated reasons, but that was the only state where it lost. But and then Oklahoma as well. Maine was kind of a complicated story, but in so many of these states, they were winning mostly by racking up the vote in urban and suburban areas, and then just kind of barely holding on enough in rural areas to eke out a victory. And in Idaho, we were a real outlier because we won pretty much everywhere. We won 35 out of 44 counties. And even the counties we lost, we didn't go below 40% of the vote in a single county. So we got this big chunk of the vote everywhere. Mm-hmm. And when I tried to think about, okay, what was the X factor? What really made the difference? I can't speak with any expertise about what happened in the other states. And I definitely, again, don't want to diminish any of those campaigns, but just from what I know that every state had something like a traditional, more top-down campaign, including Idaho. There was a coalition that we were even a part of in the final stretch that included traditional things like TV ads, high-profile endorsements from politicians and business leaders and things like that. But what was so striking from the very beginning about our campaign is that we were just constantly going county to county and organizing. We were doing public events a year and a half out from the vote, and trying to create a spectacle that would draw people in. That's why we painted this camper, this old 1970s RV, bright green. Mm-hmm. And we put, a lot of people said, like, don't use the word Medicaid, it's unpopular and all these things. But we just said, no, forget that. We're going to put Medicaid for Idaho across the side of the camper, because all the polling actually indicates that we've seen from around the country indicates that Medicaid, in fact, is very popular. Even among Republicans, it's about 50-50. Mm-hmm. So we're just going to go all in and create a spectacle and try to get people to just show up. And once people show up, we'll try to inspire them and then ultimately challenge them to lead in their communities, so that when we drive out of town, they're still there and they're mm-hmm. they're still advocating for it. They're still bringing more people into the process. So that's what we did. We organized local teams in, at first it was like around 15 counties. It grew to more like 20, which is close to half of the counties. We had like real teams on the ground with designated leaders. We had the actual list of the leaders, of people who accepted that role as leaders. And that's where the title of the article comes in, the part about doing something big. We originally got that concept from a book called Rules for Revolutionaries, where written by Bernie organizers in the 2016 campaign, where their big insight is that there are so many people all scattered all around the country, everywhere, rural, urban, suburban, wherever, who just want to do something big, but they haven't been challenged yet. Mm-hmm. And they haven't been provided with some amount of strategy and know-how, and then challenged to actually do it. That's what we did. We went all around Idaho. We challenged local people to do something big.
And that's what I really love about this piece and the whole campaign that y'all did up there. Because it was really about like reintroducing democracy in the kind of classic sense to communities. It's saying, not only do we want you to vote on this, but like organize the people around you, have a collective voice. And as you were just saying, do something big. And I love the part in the piece where you mentioned the consultant whose advice was the complete opposite of doing that you needed to hit some bigger progressive fundraising goals. How viable do you think that this kind of strategy is across the board in other states, but also for trying to get other progressive programs down the line? Building things like, obviously, Medicaid expansion is something that's so direct to folks, but this kind of bottom up strategy of building community organizing that can sort of break through a kind of like red left divide.
I mean, I think it's almost always the case that should be part of the strategy in any campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you find yourself in a community or in a state or in a locality where there's a lot of money laying around where people want to donate, you should be raising a lot of money and spending it effectively. I might have to grab my 1-year-old in a second and bring him on.
You're revealing. People are speculating. Is it a cat? Is it a child?
Yeah,
What's happening?
He was playing a ukulele
The
a minute ago. But
please bring him on.
So I might just have to pause in a second. But I think he'll give me.
We can play the trailer if you need to duck out.
Oh yeah, that could be good.
Yeah.
So I think any campaign has to really. Okay, I'll bring him on.
Okay. Do you have the trailer? We can put that on for a minute.
Yeah, let me. I have to pull it up.
I also forgot a big part of Luke's resume, I believe, is he introduced David to Michael.
Hey, buddy. How's it going?
Micah, and we won't. For people who are just listening and not watching,
a very
we've got
cute
a
baby
1-year-old
is entered.
named Micah on the screen here.
Oh.
Okay, let me just, maybe we could play a trailer in a second, but I could just answer that question. I think it's a really important question. I think with any campaign, you've got to assess, what resources do you have? And I think it would be naive not to always try to raise whatever money you can and spend it effectively on what works.
Mm-hmm.
But what a lot of campaigns don't do is they don't realize that something like traditional people power really is a resource.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of time it's just because we've lost touch with that form of power, which really is democracy, right? That's what, most fundamentally, that's what democracy is. That's what the word actually means.
Mm.
It means kratos, power, demos, people, right? So it's, and my sense is that even, I wouldn't say on the left, but among liberals, a certain kind of progressive movement, we've really lost touch with that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even more so than on the right, because in recent years, when you look at like who has real people power, look at the evangelical movement, like look at the guns rights movement, for all the money that gets slushed around with the NRA and everything. They also have real, gun clubs and communities, and you have like local membership, people who get together and they talk about politics and they figure out what their local strategy is going to be.
Right.
In too many places, among progressives, we've just kind of morphed into these top-down movements where you just belong to a lot of mailing lists and you send off a lot of checks and log into Act Blue, but no one ever really asks you to lead. No one really asks you to take responsibility to do something in your own community. So
you're breaking the cardinal rule of acting. They say never do a scene with a baby or a puppy.
Here's this trailer I think we could take a gander at here.
Should I just say something quick about the movie?
Yeah, actually, that'd be
please.
great.
Perfect.
So it's a new short documentary, probably about an hour. Our organization is called Reclaim Idaho. This is just Reclaim Idaho, the film. And it's by this really interesting group, film production company called Moose Herd, out of Brooklyn. Actually, they came out because I think they originally heard about us in Idaho through the single payer champion Tim Faust, who I know has been on Majority Report maybe once or twice, but anyway, Tim Faust came out and organized in the final stretch, and then I think they kind of came along with him, and then they just filmed, and now we're finally seeing the fruit of that work that they did. So why don't we check out the trailer?
Oops, so we're not getting
I'm not
audio.
getting sound.
Oh, what's going on here? Let's see. Oh, sorry, I have Vimeo muted for other reasons, but here is.
There you go.
So the only remaining asset she has is her home, right? And I knock on her door, and she is grappling the decision: is my life worth saving if it's going to make my family homeless? I'm just a stranger who's knocked on her door, and here she is, like, genuinely asking my advice, like, am I worth saving? My husband and I were talking and thinking, what can we do about this? Like, sharing things on Facebook or retweeting them doesn't move the needle at all.
Literally 60 to 70 people showed up just like on short notice to come to this thing and go knock on doors. People just wanted to do something.
Knock on every door. My name's Emily, and I'm a volunteer out talking to folks about voting today.
We need to organize a statewide tour.
Garrett came home one day and was just like, hey, I think we should paint our RV green and drive it around the state. As I'm driving down the highway, like, moss and branches and things are like flying off of it.
And they say, no, that's not popular here. That's not going to go. People don't like Medicaid expansion.
People shouldn't have had to speak so loudly about this. The politicians should have done something about this crisis, and they've just been playing political football with people's lives.
People thought we were going to get just terrorized going to rural towns. They thought we were going to, get Molotov cocktails thrown at us.
We're getting a lot of don't talk to me anymore on this list.
We need people, each and every person, to know what this is and why this is important.
When you get out there and talk to people, you see how popular this is, and then other people throw themselves into the fight.
It's not a matter of reaching across the aisle. It's a matter of going out to ordinary people and reaching out to them. It's more like reaching across the doorstep and rather than the aisle.
Medicaid has touched so many lives here. I'm not just going to be silent anymore. I'm not just going to assume that common sense will prevail. We have been working for a year for these days. I just don't want to wake up tomorrow and think I could have done something more,
Can we count your vote? Are you going to vote? How's your voting feel?
Are you a voter?
Yes! Yes!
All of a sudden, this whole movement has just snowballed into something massive, and we're at the helm, and so you just have to keep going.
If we go out and organize around issues, around values that unite us, if we map out a clear strategy and pursue it relentlessly, we have power.
That's awesome. When does it come out?
So we don't have a release date yet. They're doing the thing where they're submitting it to various festivals and things, hoping that it gets picked up by a few of those before being streamable online. Mm-hmm. But you can go. Oh man, I should have. Maybe someone could verify this, but I think it's Reclaim Idaho Doc. At Reclaim Idaho Doc is the Twitter handle that they've put together for the documentary. If you're interested in keeping up on that, and you can, I think you can go to reclaimidahofilm.com and sign up for updates to get to be able to follow that. One of the things that was really extraordinary to me was it's just heartwarming. Really was in the last couple months, I started getting messages from many different people in Idaho telling me, I didn't know you were friends with Michael Brooks. And they were big TMBS fans in Idaho.
Oh, that's awesome.
and now they're connecting with Reclaim Idaho. So, and I'm sure there's some people out there listening right now who are in that category. There was even one person who I knew really well who we just he never knew that I knew Michael or anything. And he said he even like went to DC once and like met with Michael or something. And
Yeah,
that's another person from Idaho.
crazy
When
how that's been
Michael
happening.
was like visiting there for some random reason. I don't
He lived
remember.
in DC for a bit.
Okay.
When he realized he was it you were telling me that he was like kind of thinking about doing something for money, and then he just couldn't, like he was considering a fracking job, and he just like was completely broke but just couldn't do it.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
Michael DC, young and confused.
Yeah. I don't even remember. I mean, I think I vaguely remember, but
Yeah, we've had so many crazy stories like that. Like my mom's next door neighbor's mother was like a huge fan. One of my good high school friends, like older brothers, like never connected the dots. There's like this strange like community of people that were tuned into TMBS but weren't necessarily patrons or like active messengers or commenters that have like now kind of come out of the recesses of the world, which has been nice to hear their stories.
Yeah. No, so but I'm getting some activity here. But,
Yeah, you need to head out?
No, that's okay.
Well, I think we were kind of a little bit on this topic. David had kind of asked about just strategies in general on the ground, and kind of, or at least I'm asking about it, just kind of words of, I don't know, inspiration or kind of just some advice on how to get a project like yours up and going in your state or in your hometown. How to encourage people to find that local group or big thing to get involved with.
And with that, Luke, if you don't mind, just because for people who aren't too familiar with how exactly this happened, if you could sort of explain the mechanism and the strategy with how y'all got Medicaid expansion, passed there.
Yeah, good. So I would say this goes back to the trailer that you just saw. A critical part of how it all started was those two people you saw in the trailer, Emily Strizich and Garrett Strizich. They founded Reclaim Idaho with me. And there's something so powerful about doing things in a collaborative way like that and not just trying to start something yourself. I can't speak enough about that. So even if you have some ambition or some idea of some grassroots project, don't just go and try to lead it yourself. Try to find, maybe seek out 5 to 10 people who might really be willing to launch it with you. Maybe only 1 or 2 of them do, but end up doing it if you're lucky. But there's so much to be said for having a team, and they were just absolutely critical from the very beginning. They, not just because it was their camper, but they were just so talented and committed. And so that's just one point that I'm reminded of watching the trailer. I think you have to, one thing that I noticed that we did very confidently and that a lot of people were surprised by, going out in public, being willing to don't just, meet in a living room or a coffee shop with other people, like-minded people sort of in a private meeting. Go somewhere, like if you meet in a coffee shop, meet right in the middle of it and have a speech so that other people hear it and maybe are drawn in. I mean, and I know that can be annoying, but you gotta actually be willing to go out in public and stand for something.
Yeah.
And too many people aren't doing that, right? Because too many people are just on the internet. And then when they do meet, they meet very privately. Mm-hmm. There's something so powerful about, even when people are totally opposed to you, oftentimes they respect you for actually, confronting them face to face. And one of the powerful things that we learned is if you go door to door, you hardly ever have nasty interactions, because people who would scream at you on social media will just be very civil.
That might be Midwest specific.
What's that?
That might be Midwest specific.
Hell, I've knocked on doors in Brooklyn, which scared the hell out of me. And people have been very nice, here too. I know. I'm just saying, like it's like there's nothing scarier than like knocking on doors, for most people. But honestly, you get a much more positive experience than you would ever expect.
Yeah,
like,
and I know
the
that
worst thing is they just don't, or they're like, bye, not interested. It's more like just like rushed and irritated. That's
so but just that kind of public aspect of it, actually go up from the very beginning, just going out, like being being willing to publicly stand for what you're advocating for. To David, to your point about the actual mechanics of it, the basic first phase had to be to actually get Medicaid expansion on the ballot. And that was like more than half the battle, because oftentimes these states, especially red states, make it extremely difficult to get things on the ballot because, in my view, that's because they know that the ballot process is one of the only counterweights to their power that exists. And I'm especially talking about like corporate groups. Like it's really one of the only counterweights to corporate power in red America. Oftentimes is the red state America is the initiative process. So you have all groups like ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, this corporate group that basically writes legislation for red states and and other states too, but they get together private and write legislation, and then they hand it off to legislators. And one of their key parts of their agenda is to dismantle the ballot initiative process. And part of the way they've done that is they just make it harder and harder to get something on the ballot. Mm-hmm. So, for example, in Idaho, you can't just get the sheer number of signatures. You have to get a certain number of signatures from 18 different legislative districts. So you're forced to go out all over the place. And then there's really strict regulations around like if the address is slightly off, invalid. Mm-hmm. If the signature is slightly off, invalid. Everything has to be like perfectly legible and written. And about anywhere from like 30 to 50% of signatures get invalidated. We had really great systems where we were able to get it up to like 80% were valid, but it's really hard.
Do you mind me asking just how you make sure the signatures are valid? Sorry to derail you.
We created an internal verification process where we had people verifying it as we went. So we would see like patterns of when they weren't being valid. So, okay, I'm going to toss them.
I think everyone's going to love that. Because that's the type of thing that can night or day make something actually get the signatures or not, innovation. So,
yeah. But that was really the first big phase where we had to get thousands and thousands of signatures. And that was where we kind of used it to our advantage by talking about how big the challenge was. Like if you go back to the title of my article, Do Something Big, mm-hmm. It was really inspiring for people oftentimes when we would go around to these communities and, and say things like, people don't think this is possible. Mm-hmm. Right. Because look at all these barriers. Hardly anything ever gets on the ballot in Idaho. Like almost never. So, but then we were able to point to a path to how we were going to do it. And a critical piece of it was then going county to county, getting commitment from people to step up as volunteers, to be leaders in their community, and take on the responsibility for getting teachers in their district. And that would, if you even want to have a prayer at doing anything like this, you've got to study some of the basics of community organizing, like things like the one-on-one meeting, like how to do a really good like one-on-one meeting with someone and really try to, you know, leave that meeting with a real commitment from them to really take action. Mm-hmm. And it's a real art. There's a real art to that, and you have to do it. I would point people in the direction of Marshall Gans. I find him to be pretty compelling, and he kind of cut his teeth with the farm workers movement in California. And there's a lot of great material on YouTube with him, Marshall Gans, about organizing. He has entire courses on organizing. But you really got to dig into just some of the art and craft of organizing if you want to have a shot at any of this stuff.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, before, thank you so much, Luke, for coming on, and it's great to meet the little one. I wanted to thank you. For people who don't know, Luke was also my professor at American University. I studied Plato and political theory with him, and he also was the person who introduced me to Michael Brooks. So, thank you so much for that again. It was really great talking to you.
Well, it's an honor to have done that. So I'm so happy with all the fruit that grew out of that.
All right, see you, Luke.
Talk to you later.
Hey, take care, everyone.
I know. I was embarrassed I left that out of his resume.
Oh, no.
It was a huge pivotal
That was a
moment.
wholesome interview all the way through.
My
It's
God.
like people power, little ones
loved
running
it.
around. Yeah.
A guitar in the background. The background is very nice too.
Guitar.
There's a guitar and like a music stand for
Yeah, we should have had a jam session.
I was thinking maybe a post game where you guys jam.
Maybe next time, yeah.
So speaking of the post game, should we do a plug and
Yeah.
maneuver our way over there?
I think that's
Absolutely.
the move.
Who would like to do
We might be doing so we got some exciting stuff in the post game as I do my click clacks to pull up my Google Doc with all of our sound. I think we might re-inaugurate The Bad with Matt Leck taking the lead, talking about all this nonsense accusations against Ilhan Omar that came from Project Veritas in a pretty predictable but no doubt annoying and stupid person who is trying to push these accusations as well, who's a so-called progressive. I wanted to remind people about what's going on with the election coming up in Bolivia, and maybe another couple other pieces of sound, some questions from the Discord. As always, we like to keep it fun and light on the other side. So come join us at patreon.com/TMBS, patreon.com/TMBS. Thank both of y'all. This was a good one.
3-for-1 content.
3-for-1 content. Yeah.
You forgot the tagline.
Oh, we did drop the pitch this one.
Yeah. Well, and also, I mean, folks just got 2 interviews for the press. One, actually 3 if you count Micah.
Rude.
Yeah, pay up. Patreon.com/TMBS. Folks, we will catch you in members. We'll catch you in the post game. A little around 9:00. So I'll see you then, folks.
I'll also be talking about the thing that Michael wouldn't buy because he didn't support the company behind it or industry behind it. It's a cliffhanger.